Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Business as Usual. Today, I have the pleasure and the honor to have as a guest our South African former colleague, current friend, and a very inspiring person, Will Coetsee. Will is a social entrepreneur. What this means, how making money without forgetting about the soul, what means staying in nature and making sure that the locals will get something from that model business, we try to understand today. Thank you very much, Will, for accepting this invitation.
Thank you so much, Florina. It's an honor to be here.
So, Will, just to start, what means exactly being a social entrepreneur?
That's a good question to start off. I think it's always important to set the scene because there are a lot of these terms that are being thrown around very, very easily these days without any real clarification or definition of them. So when I refer to a social entrepreneur, it's somebody that looks at the triple bottom line, that looks at people, planet, and profits equally. Because at some point during the process of doing business, you're going to have to make a choice. And that at that point, you have to choose. Do you choose profit above people, or do you choose the planet above people, or do you choose the other two above the third? So in my view, it's trying to balance those three aspects.
And then how have you reached this balance? Have you studied? Have you started with a plan? Have you learned this along the way?
So my background was in biodiversity. I studied biodiversity at university, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So I went up to our family farms in Limpopo. Now, for those of you that don't know South Africa, Limpopo is the northernmost province in South Africa, and it borders Botswana and Zimbabwe. And it's a very remote and rural area. So it means it's a lot of open areas, a lot of wildlife areas, and we had farms up there. So I moved up there just to work on the farm, to manage the farms, the game farms mostly with wildlife on them. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. So one of my favorite mottos is, I didn't know what I didn't know. Because I think too many times entrepreneurs sort of can look back over a career and say, oh, this is how it worked out. And I just had this idea from the beginning, which I don't really believe. I think there's a lot of serendipity, there's a lot of chance, there's a lot of good luck and good fortune involved through the process. So for me, this started with my mother. My mother is also an entrepreneur, and she was very, very focused from the beginning, from the mid or early 1980s, to making sure that the value that's being created through the business that she runs, which is producing handwork or craft art, and that some of that value is being shared with the local community, that they can actually not only have pride in their work, but also have a tangible benefit of the work that they were doing. So this came together for me in 2008, really on a large scale. I had just finished studying an MBA. And I thought, well, now I need to come and do something worthwhile with this knowledge that I've gained. You'll remember in 2008, it was also a very interesting time because there was the global recession after the economic crash. And everything in higher education and business changed from focusing on profits only to actually looking at incorporating ethics into business education and business knowledge. So these two things put together were part of a melting pot. And then we were introduced to one of our former colleagues, Michelle Colson, and looked at how can we develop some interesting business focused on plant extracts from South Africa that could be used as cosmetic ingredients for companies throughout the world. And during this process, we were then introduced to a Dutch funding organization that had a very strong social enterprise focus to make sure that you were looking after the community, but also looking after the environment while producing and while running your business. So all of these factors together sort of worked in tandem with each other, and that's where it started. And once it started, it was like a drug. It was something where you can see the faces of the people that you're working with, and you can see how they grow and how they develop, knowing that they are respected and that their opinion and their knowledge and their inputs are actually being valued in the company. And once you've tasted that, I don't think there's ever a point that you can go back.
Beautiful. And thank you for sharing this with us. What comes into my mind as a question, Will, is what have you learned along these years from the local farmers, from those people that were not expecting success into this form that the Western societies understand success?
That's a great question. I've said for a long time that I learn as much from the people on the ground, outgrower farmers, employees of our business, and people that we work with outside our organization, as I do from businessmen, from CEOs in Hamburg, or from other funding organizations. So I've learned so much from people, primarily to be vulnerable. I think often there is especially in the Western mindset, there you have to sort of fake it till you make it. You have to pretend, and if you keep doing that and you keep believing those stories you tell yourself long enough, then they'll become true. And I don't agree with that. I think there's another one of my favorite sayings, or a motto, if I can put it that way, is esse quam vedere, which means to be rather than to seem. And I think this is probably the most important thing that I've learned from people working with us and for us, is that they are rather than to seem to be. So I think especially in the COVID time, especially in times of lots of social media and things like that, people can create a vision of themselves that they would like to see, but that's not always true. And I think the further you move away from your true self, the more difficult it is to return to it.
Indeed. And then going back to the business as usual, these values and the fact of being vulnerable still have to be matching the budget and the plan of a company, because you are a CEO. So you have to understand exactly where to move in order to make the business profitable. How do you combine this?
Oh, it's been such an interesting ride, especially since March 2020, when COVID and the lockdown struck, to see, okay, how do you navigate, especially cash flow? How do you navigate planning for a very uncertain future? And we've all been experiencing that for the last 3 or so years. Internally, I think the first part is to make sure that you're as agile as possible, that you can adapt to a changing world, because the world is changing faster than ever before. To make sure that you can react to situations that occur that you have no control over. So in our case, this was changing our business model during the period of hard lockdown to producing hand sanitizer on at a very quick rate, and making sure that we could address that change in the market, because there was a demand, but the demand wasn't necessarily for beauty products as usual. It was for these types of hygiene products. So making sure that you're as agile as possible and reactive as possible. That's internally. Then between the company and your clients and your suppliers, I think communication is key. Everybody has been experiencing cash flow challenges, especially if it's a smallish company, and making sure that you still have those lines of credit or access to your suppliers or your customers, to make sure that you communicate as effectively and as quickly as possible. I found that is really key. So when we link those two parts, the agility and the communication, then I think from there you have to say, okay, we can be vulnerable, but we still have to inspire confidence. We can't just sit and say, listen, I'm so vulnerable, because nobody would want to follow. So you still have to make sure that you're reacting, but that you're also proactive. You're looking at a 3-month or a 6-month or a 12-month horizon to say what's going to happen and how can we make sure that we're ready for that.
And after these years of pandemics, and knowing that 2022 is a little bit coming back, what is the biggest intake that you can share with us after these challenging times?
I think the most important part for me as an entrepreneur is I think we're much more resilient than we thought we were. Everybody thought, at least in South Africa, that the pandemic or the lockdown would last 3 weeks and then we would go back to our normal lives. And little did we know that it would actually be 3 years, and it's still not totally gone. It's still not totally over. So I think we're actually much, much tougher than we thought we were. We thought if some small thing changes, then we won't be able to survive. And I've seen this resilience across many levels of our company and in the industry that we work with. So if everybody's going through something together, even if it's in different ways, I mean, the lockdown in South Africa was very different to what it was in Germany or in Europe or in China for that matter. But we all understand that COVID is a global pandemic. It's not just a South African situation. And if you can communicate how it's going on your side and making sure that you can deal with what you can deal with. I think Stephen Covey had this beautiful, the two circles. The one would be your circle of concern and the other one would be your circle of influence. So you can take note of the circle of concern, but there's not much that you can do about it. If you focus on your circle of influence and make sure you can change and can control the things that you can, it will already help you for the circle of concern. So I think that would probably be the biggest learning point over the past 3 years, is that we are much more resilient than we ever gave ourselves credit for before.
Thank you so much. Yes, it is. It is a very deep part of the resilience that we haven't touched yet. And I think sometimes the challenges that we come across in life are simply to help us going along the way, because we have so many patterns of how to be successful, to the point of where we have no clue what more successful mean. Successful mean being resilient. Successful can mean being vulnerable, as you say. And the approach that you have of staying within the nature, thanks to the nature, for the local people, and certainly making sure that the business is running, is a continuity between old and new, between past and the unknown. I find it very inspiring for those that are at the beginning of their business cycle, and of those that have probably learn something in the university as being very theoretical, and now they have to apply. And I have the feeling sometimes there is a gap between just making money, making sure that we are profitable, and then how to make this without hurting the nature. You know, there is a word that is very, very commonly used, very fashionable, and this word is sustainability. And I would like to ask you, what is sustainability for you, Will?
I have this conversation even internally so often, because everybody throws away these sort of green terms like sustainability or sustainable competitive advantage or things like that, when sustainable only means that it's durable, that it can continue, but it doesn't. Nothing is sustainable as it is. So you have to keep on adapting it to make sure that it's sustainable. The previous point I made about vulnerability, I think that's it can be defined in a way to say it's about being honest with yourself. It's about telling yourself the story that is really the truth. And this is part of that, to be rather than to seem. That you say, if you're telling yourself the truth and really addressing a situation that's a challenge, or that you see is going to be a challenge in the future, you have a much better chance of being sustainable than if you avoid it. In South Africa, you know, we have plenty of wild animals, and one of the wild animals in South Africa is an ostrich. Now, an ostrich is known for it that he would put his head into a hole in the ground, and that would be the idea of avoiding any danger. But that's always the least sustainable solution, because if something is coming to hunt you, then you need to do something about it. You can't just pretend to not see it and pretend that it's not going to change your whole existence. So I think sustainability is about being truthful to yourself, about communicating it, and then reacting. I always like acronyms. So I have an acronym called FEAR, which depends on three points to get a result, and that is focus, energy, and action. So if you have focus, you have the energy, and you take action, then you will get the result. So I think for sustainability, that would be my takeaway.
Oh, great. So fear, which doesn't mean the fear that we know, but it means focus, energy, and action for the result.
Exactly.
Very nice. Very inspiring. Well, one personal question you might decide not to answer, but I would like to ask you, what makes you happy?
Oh, that's a great question. I've not asked that for myself for a while. No, I'd be very happy to answer that. I think there's a spiral from your core that goes outward, and there's so many opportunities to be happy. I think it really is a question of focus. We are often told or expected as entrepreneurs or employees to just work harder. If you need something, you're not getting the result, just work harder, spend more time, especially entrepreneurs. I always say it's a case of you feel like you're never working, but you feel like you're working all the time. So it could be on a Sunday morning, it could be on a Saturday evening, but you could be taking off on a Wednesday morning to spend time with your family. So it's a very difficult thing for an entrepreneur to make sure that you create those guidelines and definitions about where it starts and where it stops. The reason I mention that is this will only be the way, in my personal experience, to reach happiness, is to know that there's a balance in my life, from internally, from myself, to my marriage, to my child, to my faith, and thereafter to business, to say, okay, to understand where the priority lies, because one can't exist without the other one. You have to look at these different factors and requirements in tandem, in balance. So if there's a balance, then I feel happy. I'm somebody also that needs somewhat of a routine, and as an entrepreneur, that's often the most difficult thing to manage, because you don't have a clock in and clock out system like you would have in a different job. So you have to manage, how do you create your routine?
And how do you set these health boundaries?
I have not completed it yet. It's always a work in process, and it depends on who you ask how they will answer. But once I get a routine and there's some structure to this these different factors, that's how I become happy. So I try to cut off, to leave work at work as much as possible. And to leave family with family and not bring that into work. But there will always be a gray area. There will always be some overlap. I think it's just a question of balancing these different parts. Tony Robbins, who you will know about as well, has got a fantastic model that he discusses about the needs that all human beings have. And I'd like to just mention the four for any of your listeners that can go and have a look at that further. But he says that there are always four basic needs of any human being. And the challenge is which vehicle you use to satisfy these needs. So the first need would be for certainty. You need to have certainty in your life to make sure that if you wake up in the morning and you take a breath, there will be oxygen into your lungs, or whichever way you get that certainty in your family life, in your marriage, or in your relationships, or in your business as well. How do you get certainty? But once you achieve that certainty and that need is met, sometimes it gets to a point where you now need to balance it, because it's juxtaposed with a second need, which is a need for variation. You need something new, you need something different, because otherwise it just becomes more of the same, or the same old, same old. So once you get those two in balance, which vehicles you use to get them in balance, that's already helping. The third need would be for significance, to make sure that you're significant, that you're standing out, that you feel like you're achieving, whether you're doing that by making money, or whether you're doing that by getting a mug that says world's best dad, or how do you get that significance in your life to say, I'm standing out, I actually matter. But once you've achieved that and you've got the right vehicles, you need to juxtapose that again and achieve connection, which is the fourth need. So once you get connection, you say, oh, now I feel like I'm part of a tribe, or I'm part of a group, or I'm part of a family. But you have to be careful, because if you have so much connection, you don't stand out anymore. You have to balance those two with each other. So I always try to look at this in my life and see, am I choosing healthy vehicles? And often I'm not achieving that. But if these different needs are in balance in the different spheres of your life, then I think that's where happiness can start growing, because happiness is a plant that has to set out roots and grow in you. It's not something where you just have happiness or not happiness.
I agree. And I'm very happy that you mentioned happiness as being a plant, because this leads me to, I would like to ask you to share a little bit with our listeners and those that are seeing this as a video. What are exactly the basics of your company? How do you make money?
Okay, Botanica Natural Products is the name of our company. It was established in 2009, and it's based in the remote rural north of Limpopo province in South Africa. Now, Botanica started very serendipitously, almost by chance, where through some knowledge of ourselves and being introduced to a colleague that I've mentioned earlier, and we then decided to see what type of interesting South African plants there are that we could extract the benefits from and then market these to cosmetic companies in the world. Our main product is called Bilbine frutescens, and this is something like aloe vera, but it's very specific to South Africa. It's a water-based extract, and we grow the plants, we harvest them, we process them, and then we market this as an active ingredient for the cosmetic industry because it is soothing, healing, and moisturizing. And this plant is then, or this extract is then incorporated into cosmetic products through companies across the globe. And that's how we have our basic value chain. Since the point of introducing this product, we've now added to our portfolio. So we have about 24 different extracts and oils that we grow and produce and sell across the globe. I must also add that this primary product of ours, we are still the only producer in the world of it. So there's nobody else producing this. And that is both exciting and innovative, but enormously challenging because you have to continuously educate your market. So when people look at this, they're saying, oh, this is fantastic. I want to do something like that. You say, yes, but be prepared to take 15 years or take 10 years to really get through the process and get people to start buying it. And as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you're very aware as well, is the uncertainty is something that you have to deal with all the time. So it's been a very interesting journey. I can't say I've enjoyed every step of the way, but I've definitely enjoyed the majority of them. And when people ask me, oh, if you could go back to 2008, 2009, would you do it again? I'll tell them I'll think about it.
Thank you so much for the honesty, Will. I think this is something that as less and less it's present in the business, because I've been hearing and read a number of books, heard a number of interviews where people tend to show only, the iceberg, as they say, oh, everything was great. I enjoyed every little moment. And I find it a little bit minimizing the whole efforts, the whole moments of discouragement, the whole moments where somebody, as any entrepreneur, is so easy to give up and say, you know what, it's too difficult.
Absolutely.
And facing that there are moments of uncertainty is of highly importance. Otherwise, we tend to mirror something that is not natural. So the entrepreneurs and even the young people that have not had any contact, neither as employees nor as entrepreneurs, and they will think, I will do this because it's easy. It sounds easy.
Yeah. I've heard so many entrepreneurs speak, and usually it's the successful ones that speak. And I often get quite frustrated because my view is what they do is they look back, and let's say they've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. They look back and they say, oh, okay, this is how it worked. And they have a sort of golden thread that they tie to the beginning and tie to themselves now and say, this happened, then that happened, then that happened. And they miss so many of the smaller mistakes or the smaller deviations that they took that weren't right, but that once they learned that they weren't right, that they could change their path. And I think that's actually the real value, because often you're telling new entrepreneurs or older entrepreneurs to what they can achieve, and they think this is straightforward. This is just an upward curve where you see that this is going to happen. Then I'm going to sell more the next year, and then I'm going to sell more the next year, and then I'm going to be successful, and then I'm going to retire on an island. And it's really not that. It's a cliche, but it's not a destination. It's a journey.
How do we make sure that these vulnerable - brave sentences are coming more often into the space, just for the sake of diversity? So certainly there might be people that are only boasting and they are only talking about success, because success is nice to hear, just like happiness is nice to see. But what stays behind and what gives fulfillment is not all the time only happy days, and we all know this. So how do you think we could, in this business field, encourage the people to show also the vulnerable parts of the business?
I think you're doing it right now. I think this is what is important is these type of podcasts, these type of stories that are told, because I know you are also a lover of good stories, and I think it's only through good storytelling that we convey this message. I have a 4-year-old son, and I read to him in the evenings, and there's not one story that I read to him that doesn't contain some adversity, something that didn't go quite to plan. And I think that's sort of in our genes to say there will be adversity. We have to be sure of that, but we can overcome it if we acknowledge it, if we're truthful with ourselves, and that we deal with it. So I think the simple answer for me would be exactly like this type of podcast of yours, is to speak to people that are vulnerable, that do realize that they don't have all the answers, and to bring these stories to the fore so that people can see when this happens to you, it's okay. It's not unusual. It's not like that you have, even if you think about the Steve Jobs story, it wasn't all plain sailing. It wasn't all perfect. It wasn't all 100%. It's almost the mistakes and the challenges and the setbacks that make that resilience, that make that so much more impressive, that they've actually reached the heights that they did.
And tell me, Will, are you in contact with people that would like to start a business in this social entrepreneurship, and they are looking for some insights or for some suggestions?
Yes and no. It's one of the things that I find a real passion is to speak to new entrepreneurs, young or old, and to share what we can, because we have experienced some things, and if there's one mistake that they don't make because they learned it from me, in that I made it, I'm very happy. So we often offer this at our company. We offer internships, mentorships, to say, please, if you want to embark on this journey of entrepreneurship, and especially social entrepreneurship, please get in contact. Unfortunately, I think there are not enough. People either don't trust it, don't trust their ability to be able to be successful in this type of venture, or I think they may get overwhelmed by the whole process, by everything that it would entail. And there's the old African saying which says, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it bite for bite. You don't eat the whole elephant at once. So don't get overwhelmed by the process. So to answer your question, yes and no. I wish there were more. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much. Well, I think at the end of the interview, maybe this would be helpful. We will just put the details where you can be contacted and the website of your company. So people who have a curiosity and who have a question, maybe they can connect. I think that's important also. And that's one of the things that made me start this podcast, to take along the way a lot of information, a lot of experience, make my own experience, and then give something back to the society. And I think there is also one important mention to make, as people forgot this help and the social, I give something, you give me something, and it's already a win-win without having any price. So especially in the Western world, we are very used to ask how much is the fish. And in this case, the fish is there for everyone. Just the fact that we have access in a different way to information that is there, and we process it for our own experience, doesn't mean that we cannot share with the others for the benefit of the whole society. And that's also part of sustainability.
That's fantastic, Florina. I think there's a really apt South African quote which says, "Moto ke moto kabatu babangwe." And it's Northern Sotho or Sepedi, which is the local language where we are based. And what it means is a person because of other people. And that is how it all fits together. We're a village, so you can't be an island. And in a village, you should have the confidence, at least, to ask for help when you need it. And it's this type of vulnerability and communication that allows us to be more resilient as a group of people together. So I agree with you 100%.
And that's no other better way to close this interview than with this message of, yes, we are a village, we are not an island. I hope more and more people will gather on this village and in this journey of us, And if we created curiosity, stay tuned. There will be more guests. There will be more stories, all there for you. Thank you so much, Will. Wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Florina.